This was my very first short cross country. So while I live in the Pacific Northwest, I was doing this flight while visiting my family in Dallas, Texas. So I departed from T-31 Aero Country airport, which is a small, kind of almost borderline private, though paved strip right next to McKinney, and then proceeded to Paris, Texas. There is no Eiffel Tower. There is really not a lot out there, but there is a fairly large airport, which makes for an easy destination for a cross-country flight. Now, since neither of the airports are local, coming back was also quite interesting, because actually coming back into T-31 was almost more challenging, just because the airport is so small and you have to kind of spot it from the air and get yourself situated and lined up for a landing. By taking a look at the route first, there's really only a couple of things to worry about. Texas here is quite flat. There's not a lot going on, almost no visual landmarks. So for navigation, I ended up using the Garmin 430 GPS system that was in the airplane, and also tuning into a couple of VORs, one that's almost at the destination and another one that's about halfway. There is a Bonham Vortac, and then there is a Paris VOR as well. So both can be a little bit useful, but if you have a GPS system, you can just follow GPS magenta line and cross-reference visual landmarks as you should, since you are practicing pilotage and dead reckoning. So here, leaving, I just have to be a little bit careful of not flying into McKinney airspace. That's a delta from ground to 2,900 feet, and departing on a southern heading from T-31. When you make your turn direct to Paris, you actually would end up overflying or just touching that airspace a little bit, so you have to kind of fly around it before you set on course. And then from there, it's just very flat, very boring. You're just kind of flying. Like I said, there is not a lot going on. There are some small lakes that are kind of square or rectangular. They're all man-made, and quite flat. One interesting piece here is you can tell where you're going by watching for water towers, which are plentiful since it's so flat. And water towers, in many cases, will say what town they belong to. So you can kind of navigate water tower to water tower. If you're really kind of low and looking for visual landmarks, it'll kind of tell you, hey, you're in McKinney because there's a McKinney water tower. So then you're just on course. There is not really any airspace to negotiate. Paris does not have a tower. You just have to remember where your top of descent is and start to reduce altitude. Otherwise, you'll end up right over the airport, and you're gonna have to either spiral or just nose down. With the folks that I was renting the airplane from, they did pre-fly this with a CFI. So I had been to Paris a few days earlier with an instructor, and kind of made that mistake of not descending early enough, and we had to descend in a hurry. So when I was by myself, I kind of knew what I was doing already, and started to descend on time. I came at midfield, made a left downwind turn, and lined up for the landing.
All right, so that blue hangar over there, that has a sign that says Paris, Texas, and I was advised to take a picture of me being at the airport, kind of as proof that I did this cross-country flight. So here is me taking that picture. I've never had anyone else suggest that I would do that and kind of validate that I actually went where I said I went. And I really can't imagine at this point that anyone would have asked me to prove that I actually went on my cross-country flight. But anyway, they did suggest I take the selfie, and here it was for my record. Going back was just as uneventful as going to Paris. As I mentioned earlier, the only thing was it was actually a little bit difficult spotting the airport as I was getting close, but it really turned out to not be a big deal. So hopefully you enjoyed this. I definitely did, and it's fun saying that I went to Paris on my first cross-country flight.